the heart of your system.
What's up guys, welcome back to another GGF mod build video. Now if you didn't already gather from the start little bit of video, we are going to take a quick look at our Computex 2019 ZOTAC build. Now ZOTAC hit us up recently, we've done quite a few builds for them in the past for like CES Computex, and they've got their brand new ZOTAC RTX 2080 Ti Arctic Storm. Now that's what's in here. So they hit us up to do a build to showcase this GPU. Just like at CES at the start of the year, they hit us up to cover their Amp Extreme 2080. So now we're doing the big boy Arctic Storm 2080 Ti. Now this is the build here. I must say it is getting harder and harder to do builds where I try and showcase the GPU. If you saw the CES build that was in the InWin X-Frame, I sort of had it standing up on an angle, and I've kind of gone the same route with this build, but I've more or less sort of laid the GPU down on a slight angle. I didn't want to sort of replicate that build and do it exactly the same, but I definitely wanted to do something else. So the main sort of layout and sort of design of this build was to keep everything as much as similar as the GPU itself. Now most of it's black and it's got sort of this gunmetal on the GPU, some of the plates and the back there. Now to me at first I thought these were sort of grey gunmetal, but they've actually thrown in what I would say a tint of green, so it was very hard to match, especially with vinyl. And also the motherboard I tried to find, I want to thank ASRock for sending the X299M. That's a micro HX X299 board, and I must admit it does match pretty much spot on with their heat sinks and the sort of heatsink over the top of the I/O there to the actual GPU. It's pretty much spot on, and probably from this video you wouldn't be able to tell any difference. And then I managed to get some vinyl which did blend in very nicely. That looks exactly the same. Now you might be wondering, this case does look a little bit different. This is the Cougar Essence. It's the little baby brother to the Cougar Conqueror, but I have modified it a little bit. You can probably see the motherboard sticks out a lot further. The traditional chassis sort of cuts off straight down here. When I was doing the layout for this build and putting everything inside, there just really was no room to run an M-ATX board and then the GPU on how I wanted it. Could you imagine having this board all the way back how it should be and then having this lie down? It just wouldn't work. I was going to go with the ASRock X299 ITX board. That did sort of fit in, but I thought, what the heck, if I'm already making this sort of manifold over here, I may as well sort of extend the whole case out a little bit, and that's what I ended up doing. Now the way how I did that, this whole motherboard tray hasn't been replaced, I've just added it onto it. So it's much easier if you're looking into doing this type of work. Instead of replacing the whole standard motherboard tray, you need to work out structural support. I simply just go over the top. You don't need as strong materials. I think I'm using 2mm, this is 2mm aluminium for this whole structure on the back. Then that's just bolted down, and then I just added black vinyl over the top of it. And then the manifold here for the shroud, that is 3mm aluminium, which again has the black vinyl up. And as I did in the CES build, which I did here, it's a really good neat little trick to polish all your edges that you're going to see. Polish them up, get them real nice and shiny because they are aluminium. And then when you vinyl wrap and then you cut it all off, you get this really nice effect where it sort of just shines all the nice chrome. All along here you see the nice chrome and so on. It just gives off a really cool effect. Now CPU on this is a 7900X. They are getting a bit old, but they're still a nice CPU. Of course we have the original G.skill Trident Z RGB. I decided not to go for the Royals. I thought the silver might have popped a little bit too much. The normal sort of matte grey on the normal Trident Z I think blends in much better, and it doesn't sort of shout out and sort of take over the rest of the build. Now other areas, of course we have the WD SSD. We might be throwing in the new WD SN750 with the heatsink. They are sending some for some builds, so I'll probably throw one of them because this is a perfect spot to see the M.2 SSD. A lot of motherboards these days, you really don't see your SSDs, especially the M.2s, because they are hidden under all your sort of covers and plates and all that stuff. Now in terms of sort of routing cables, I wanted to do something a little bit different. Some people will probably say, oh, I was lazy, I didn't do hard tubing. Now I smash out a lot of builds, 99% of mine are hard tubing, but I thought I wanted to do something a little bit different, a little bit out there. I wanted this idea of all the tubes running back into a central location. I did want to have more than just the 4, but unfortunately I just ran out of room, especially on the back. So this one just has your 2 from the CPU and then 1 from each rad sort of curve around. And I wanted to try and get them as symmetrical as possible to try and look like they weren't so much flex tube, but sort of designed that way. And as you can see, I think it did turn out pretty good. Now other areas of the case, main water cooling support on this is Bixby. I want to thank them for shouting out. especially the CPU block, a lot of the fittings. Now the radiators are EK, only because I did want the slightly thicker ones, and I wanted the more squarish traditional. I do find EKs just blend in nicely with a lot of builds. There's no sort of logo branding on the sides and so on. Now a lot of people have asked about this side panel. On Instagram I posted some photos. A lot of my builds I tend to scrap the tempered glass side panels. I find they block out far too much of the internals and they do reflect too many lights and so on. This is just 6mm acrylic. I just traced around the original side panel, although this one was a bit different because if you can see, the original side panel does actually go all the way out to here and then sort of up and around. Because this sort of structural area is too wide, I had to sort of get a bit creative and do a different side panel. Although I wouldn't really call this a side panel anymore, it's really just sort of a feature to the build. It's not really doing much, but in these Cougar cases, you do need some sort of side panel because once you take these off, you lose a lot of the structural support because it does sort of flop down a little bit. So I did need some sort of side panel to keep that up. But yeah, this is 6mm acrylic, traced around it, cut it out with a jigsaw. I prefer to use a bimetal blade, really fine bimetal blade. I find that gets a better cut than actually using a dedicated acrylic blade. I'm not sure why. I just find out I don't get any chips at all. If I do use an acrylic, a blade for cutting acrylic especially, I do get little chips along the side. So yeah, once I do that, I just sand it down. It depends on how I want the finish. This edge, I wanted a nice frosted one. So I just left it at about 1500 grit sandpaper, worked it about a file, then I used a few different grits and then got it to where I like it. Whereas on the previous Cougar Conquer build I did, I actually kept on going. I used like 2000 grit and then I used an actual polish and got it actually crystal clear. It just depends on the build and how I want it. I do kind of like it when it's frosted like this. I will turn it on because then you do get the light refracts off it and it does look pretty cool. Other areas of the build, of course, there's a heap of RGB. Now, in terms of RGB, I didn't want to go too crazy. Of course, Zotac does love their RGB, but I didn't want to sort of distract the main focus of this build, which is the GPU. So I sort of kept it to the sort of areas, one over here, which is your RAM and your CPU block, and then just the fans itself. And then I added some sort of other dedicated RGB areas like the underglow here. I'd put this strip under and then I put a right angle bracket just in front of it. So that just goes across and down, because without that bracket, if anyone's looking sort of straight on, you can actually see the whole RGB strip, and I didn't really want that. I just wanted the glow coming down. And then I added one up in this bit where the back goes over. It's hard to see, but when you're looking at it, it just gives this nice glow along the back of the case. Now, one other area I want to talk about is the back of the case. I'm not sure how well you can see that. Of course, that is the pump and res combo. That was kind of not really a last resort, but I kind of knew when I was doing this build, there's no way I'm going to get a pump and reservoir inside this case. It's just far too small, and especially with this layout, how I did it. So I ended up just putting it on the outside. It may look a little bit weird, but it's really the only sort of option I had to do. But when it comes to this build, the main focus is definitely this side. So I do kind of like how it's out of the way and it's not sort of like taking up a whole area of the case, because if I did have a pump and res, it would have probably got in the way of other areas. And now another area is this whole back area. If you can see, this sort of bulge area is completely new. I had to do that because there are a lot of pass-throughs running through here, especially this bulged out area. That's where all the pass-throughs come through and where they sort of link up to complete the loop. And then I just added this sort of design in the middle just to give it some aesthetics. It doesn't really need the airflow. It just needs some aesthetics. You probably saw this little hole in here. This hole I had to sort of bust out to screw in a screw once this front panel goes back on, because that's where I got all my access for cabling. That's where the pump Molex is, so that's how I filled it with that Molex. But once this is all done, I'll probably just keep another bit of this. I add this mesh in myself. I just paint it the same gunmetal color and just stick it on the inside. I'll probably keep a spare bit and just throw that on when Computex starts, just so you don't have that hole in there like that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. You've got the Arctic Storm in there, really nice cart, and then yeah, the Azeroth X299M Extreme 4. The actual VRM and the cooling is quite beefy on this, so if you are looking for an M-ATX X299, although X299 is getting a little bit old, that is a nice little board. Other sort of features, of course, Seasonic. I use a lot of Seasonic. Seasonic Prime, titanium power supply in there. And that's pretty much it. A lot of people have asked about these fans. No, these are not the Enermax fans, which a lot of people think. The Animax ones I do have, but they're more static RGB. You don't have the multicolors at once. These are the JESM from AliExpress. I picked these up a long time ago and I actually find them really, really nice. I like how the RGB is in 3 stages, 3 different lines, and it's not sort of a real thick, wide RGB, whereas a lot of fans you get like a ½ inch strip of RGB and then it really just oversaturates and it doesn't look that good, whereas these are just little lines. It's nice and consistent and it looks really good. But yeah, that's pretty much it on this video. I want to thank ZOTAC for giving me another opportunity to do this. Computex is going to be full on. I think this is the second build out of 9 or 10 I've got to complete, so I've got a heap to go. That's why I haven't done a time-lapse build on this. I'm just running out of time. I've got the Z Tower in the back for an art gallery in Sydney. That's got to be done. I'll be doing a time-lapse on that, but I think I'll only be doing a time-lapse on the Z Tower and maybe 1 or 2 other Computex builds, but I'll definitely cover all of these at Computex when I'm there. So yeah, once again, I want to thank ZOTAC for giving me this chance. I want to thank you guys for watching. Hope you like this build and stay tuned for the next video.